What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Middleborough High School Summer School. My name is Jeremy Frazer, and today we will be exploring environmentalism and science as policy. So, to help lead this discussion, we have the one, the only Dr. Jeanette Davis. She is a marine microbiologist, she is a policy expert, and she is also a best-selling author. So, Dr. Davis, it's great to have you with us today.
Hi, thank you so much, Jeremy, for having me. I'm truly honored to be a part of this discussion about environmentalism and just pretty much what it is to be a Black young woman in environmental sciences and my journey. And, I'm always looking for ways and opportunities to be transparent about that. I know for me growing up, the first Black scientist that I ever encountered was in college, and that was at my school, which was Hampton University. That's where I went for undergrad, which is a historically Black college university. And so, obviously going to an HBCU, I would encounter other, Black people, but Black scientists. So I'm always looking for opportunities and ways to promote science, to discuss my journey and be transparent about that, and hopefully just kind of uplift the next generation of scientists.
Absolutely. All right, so to start off, how about you tell us a bit about what your field is, and more importantly, what made you choose that path? What led you there?
So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a marine microbiologist, and the best way of kind of describing it is first marine, meaning salt water, so
Mhm.
ocean, and then microbiology is the study of uh, organisms or living organisms that you cannot see without a microscope. So you can't see them with the naked eye. And I always make that distinction because oftentimes when I say I'm a marine biologist or a marine microbiologist, people are like, think about whales and dolphins and sea turtles, like the charismatic fauna is what we call it. And all of those are also ocean organisms. They live in the ocean. But again, I don't really focus on those larger organisms. I focus on the small organisms, the microbes. And that's really important because most of the oxygen that we breathe in as human beings actually comes from small plant-like bacteria that you can't see in the ocean. And so I always tell people that if it wasn't for those small bacteria, the things that you can't see in the ocean, we wouldn't have the oxygen that we have here in the environment. So they're really important. They do a lot of different things in the ocean, but that's one reason why they're really, really important. But I got into this field, I've always loved science growing up. I did not consider being a marine biologist or marine microbiologist. I happened to just love science. In fact, chemistry was my favorite. And when I applied to schools, when I was in high school applying for undergraduate schools, I actually applied on two different tracks. I did like half of the schools I applied to were based on science. So I was doing like chemistry or pharmacy or pre-med. And the other half, believe it or not, was law, pre-law or like a history or law type of program. And now that I work in the section, like the intersection between science and policy simply is how laws are implemented, it
Mhm.
makes sense that I had an interest in both of these. But I knew that I was never going to practice law. So I said, no, I love science. So I'm going to do science. But because I went to Hampton University, which is on the water, also known as our home by the sea, because it is on the Hampton River, we had a marine science department. And I literally just went into the department, trying to figure out if I was going to do chemistry or another science. And I fell in love with it. This is super nerdy, but I fell in love with the curriculum because I learned that to study ocean science is to study a variety of sciences. And most people don't know that. Most people think that it's limited to just the animals in the ocean, but to really be an ocean scientist, you have to understand chemistry, physics. I just told you about plant-like bacteria in the ocean. Technically plants are the study of botany, so I had to do botany. I had to do meteorology because
Wow.
much of our weather and our climate is all driven by the ocean. The ocean works with the atmosphere to make those patterns. So I had to do meteorology, I had to do geology, which is the study of like how the earth is formed. So all of that to say, like, I fell in love with ocean science because studying ocean science is studying so many different sciences. And so that's what I loved. And I had a number of chemistry courses, which I loved chemistry. So I basically stumbled upon it because I was willing to be curious. And so I always encourage, young people to be curious. Science is simply the structure that supports curiosity. And so I always say, like, young people are scientists by default. They want to explore, they want to learn new things. They're always touching, tasting, trying things. And so I think we just have an innate nature to explore. And that's what science is. It's just a foundation of exploration, essentially. So that's how I came upon marine science.
I mean, and that's pretty dope that you found a field where you got to just kind of throw yourself into a multitude of areas of expertise. So, I mean, more power to you for finding a career choice where you get to cover a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
From checking out some of your socials, one of the things that I found most interesting, because it's also something that I spent quite a bit of time contemplating, is how our environmental policies intersect with issues of racial and economic equality as well. I saw you had a couple posts about what we're doing with these disposable masks once we're no
Yeah.
longer wearing them, or issues such as the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Can you talk to us a bit about how issues of social and racial justice oftentimes can meld in with issues of the environment as well?
Yeah. That's a great question, and it's something that I have been really kind of vocal about on my social media platforms is allowing people to see, and especially environmentalists, that we are, of course, fighting for various policies to help reduce the impacts, the negative impacts of climate change and everything that's going on in the environment. But I always tell people, as an environmentalist or a scientist, if you really want to solve the issue of climate change and what's happening on the planet, the first thing we have to do is accept all the people who are actually on the planet, right?
Mm.
Like, because the planet is for all of us. But what has happened over time, and like you mentioned, Flint, Michigan, is a clear case where you're in an environment where, you know, the Great Lakes, which includes, the various lakes within that region of Michigan, Illinois, and all of that Midwest region, that's the one of the largest bodies of fresh water. And just to make the distinction, like I said, marine meaning salt water, fresh water is without salt. And fresh water is a great resource for our drinking water. And how is it that the country's largest reservoir of fresh water that can be used for drinking water, the brown and black people who live closest to it don't have access to it?
Mm.
And in that particular case, what happened with the reservoir is it essentially is a piping issue where the pipes are old and there's a lot of lead leaching out of these pipes. But it's really convenient that the pipes are going into black and brown communities where they're leaking out lead, and not the other neighboring communities where they have access to the same areas of water, but their water is not contaminated. And so Flint is just one instance. But overall, when you look at things like asthma and the black and brown communities, and a lot of times communities of colors happen to live closer to industrial sites, treatment plants, and those types of things. All of that means that we are exposed more to certain pollutants in the air, certain toxins in the air. And so, that is coming out in terms of cancer rates, asthma rates, respiratory issues, all of that. And so I always tell people that, like, all of these things are linked. I don't want to sound like, Disney, the circle of life, but that's really what it is. Like, you can't really connect the environment from human health. Like, because when the planet thrives, we thrive. Let's put it that way, And when we are not taking care of ourselves, then we're not taking care of the planet either, right? We're all a part of this ecosystem. That's what we call it in terms of, science. It's an ecosystem where, everything has an individual niche, but together we are connected in some way, somehow. So yeah, there are lots of cases like that where, again, Black and brown communities kind of get the end of the stick, where we're in these areas where we are just subjected to higher pollutants.
And I think that's a really important distinction that you make, because I think quite often we think of the environment and these sort of social issues as two completely separate entities that have no overlap at all. So it's awesome to hear somebody speak about how one is so intricately connected to the other.
Yeah. And even, I've been vocal about COVID and, you know, and just pandemics overall. Like, I'm no virologist, don't get me wrong, but I am a microbiologist, and virology is a subset of microbiology. So I know a little bit about viruses, but with that being said, when you look at just disease overall, a lot of the issues that we're facing with disease and crisis, it really is a health crisis. It really is how we connect with our environment, how we treat our environment, how we treat wildlife and animals in our environments. Um, a lot of viral diseases are zoonotic, meaning, they started in an animal before it got into a human being. So that just in itself tells you that there is something going wrong with the human and animal interaction, that diseases are jumping from one to another. And so again, a lot of that has to do with how we treat our environment and wildlife. And if we don't get a handle on certain things like climate change and just overall respect for wildlife and ourselves, then we're going to probably see more disease and all of those things. It's going to be an increase because we literally are creating environments for disease to thrive.
So remember, y'all, circle of life, everything's
Circle of
connected.
life.
Got to do
Simba.
better. Got to hold them up. Got to do
Yeah,
better.
you got to respect all living things on the planet. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. All right, so kind of swinging back into that sort of territory with Disney and the Lion King, I know that you're also a best-selling children's author. So
Yes.
why don't you talk to us a bit about your book and what kind of inspired you to write it?
Yeah. So the book, I have it right here, of course.
Hey.
You guys can see that. It's called Science is Everywhere, Science is for Everyone. And it's really self explanatory. Like, science literally is everywhere, and science is for everyone. And, I was inspired to write this book, one, as again, a scientist in the field and growing up and not seeing representation, and loving science, but never had the language of science and never would have thought to be a scientist, right? So oftentimes people who do like science, they tend to say like, oh, I'm going to be a medical doctor, or I'm going to be an engineer or a pharmacist or something like that. And all of those professions that I listed, those people are indeed scientists too, but they are applied scientists. So they take the basic research of a scientist like me and they apply it to solving a particular problem. Like, with medical doctors, it's medicine, but essentially they're biologists, right? They're a certain type of biologist, but their specialty is on the human bodies and understanding symptoms and disease from the human body. But they're a type of doctor, and those types of scientists tend to be a little more visible than basic research scientists. And so while I love chemistry, I would never say I want to be a chemist. Most people just will not say I want to be a chemist, right? Because they don't know what it means to be a chemist. Or most kids who love animals will not say I want to be a zoologist, because they don't understand that if you love animals and want to study animals, you can be a scientist called a zoologist. And so this book is around giving young people the tools and the language to connect with the science that's all around them, and showing a very clear career path of that. So I mentioned zoologist, so that's highlighted in the book. If you're a kid who like me loved playing in plants, right? That's the study of plants is botany. So I highlight a botanist. I highlight, of course, a microbiologist, of course, an oceanographer, and If you like volcanoes, that's geology, right? That's a geologist. I also do things like how cooking is a chemistry, right? So it's the things that's all around kids that they connect to and also have the language of science. But another part of that is it's a diverse book. The main characters are children of color. So it's twofold, giving you the understanding and the basic knowledge of science, but also ensuring that everyone is included in science. And that goes for the Black and brown people who never see themselves in science, but it also goes to the predominant group, which are white people and currently represent somewhere or anywhere between like 50 to 60% of most science degrees are awarded to white people. But for them to also see that, hey, like, it's okay to see another person that doesn't look like you also excelling and doing science. So it's for everyone. That's why it's literally for everyone, because for the people who don't see it, you get to celebrate that other people can love science and not look like you. And for the people who look like the people in the book, you get to embrace that you're a part of the conversation.
Absolutely. And that sort of representation matters because, like you said, even if it's not a field you want to go in, it just further enriches your sense of culture to know people who look like me are in a multitude of fields. So I
Yes,
really appreciate the work you're doing on that front as well.
yes. And the book, again, Science is Everywhere, Science is for Everyone. It's available on Amazon.
All right. And our last question that we have for you is, what are some resources for folks who want to know a bit more about you or microbiology or your book or any of these kind of policies we've discussed? What are some quick resources that they can check out online?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Dr_Ocean24. I'm also on Twitter as Dr. Ocean24. My website is going to be available in the next week or so. But if you do it now, it will still come up. It's www.drjeanettedavis.com or www.drocean.science. Either way, there are, I'll have resources and things available and kind of talk about my journey, what's on my mind. There's my scientific publications, various articles and interviews that I've done around being an ocean scientist. But outside of that, believe it or not, like, this is weird, but like, I remember like growing up seeing like Bill Nye's the Science Guy,
Mm-hmm.
and he's kind of like back on the scene, right? And so he's been really vocal around science and breaking it down in a way for people to understand. There are a number of other, I have to shout out, other marine biologists that I know. Justin Schaefer, he has the Magic Cool Bus. That really breaks down science for young people. He's also a Hampton University graduate. So yeah, there are a number of tools that are available, and I'm naming the things that to me would be fun and exciting for younger people to really understand how science is all around us and how cool science is.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I just want you to know that I am, and I'm sure our listeners are very appreciative of the work you're doing, not only for Black culture, but for our planet as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So that's all we have for today's episode of Summer School. Remember, stay safe, stay kind, and most importantly, stay informed. Until the next episode.